everyone. Shabbat Shalom. Hi, Shabbat Shalom. Let's see. I'm going to turn on my camera.
We want to wish you a Shabbat Shalom. We're figuring it all out on our technical side, but I invite everybody to just take a deep breath. Let the week and Shabbat fill your lungs and fill your mind.
Oh, shoot.
Take a deep breath out.
I need some help, please.
Let's do it one more time. A big deep breath in. Deep breath out in this chaotic week and this craziness of our lives. Maybe you take a second and think back on something that was joyful this week, something that filled your spirit and filled your heart. Maybe it was a text message from an old friend, or a blossom that you saw, or somebody was nice to you in line at Trader Joe's. Whatever it might have been, take a second of joy. Maybe you're a Houston Rockets fan and James Harden has finally fled your city or something like that. All right, there she is.
Just a sec. We're going to try and get it back. Hi, everyone. Shabbat Shalom. And, all right. Well, we're going to put up a slide anyway for this opening song. It's commanded to us by God to love our neighbor as ourself. We've been singing the song as part of our music and meditation on Tuesday evenings, and it's a good way to center ourselves as we bring in Shabbat. It goes like this. Hareini mekabel alai mitzvat habore ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Hareini mekabel alai mitzvat habore ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Hareini mekabel alai mitzvat habore ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Yadada, yadada, yalalala, yalalala. Hareini mekabel alai mitzvat habore ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. One more time. Hareini mekabel alai et mitzvat habore ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha.
Shabbat Shalom. I am delighted to be celebrating Shabbat with you tonight, as always. And I'm also honored to welcome some special guests. Tonight is Beth Am's annual Axelrod lecture. And to tell you a bit about the lecture and the beloved rabbi for whom it is named, it's my special privilege to invite up to our virtual bima, Rabbi Sanford Axelrod. Rabbi Axelrod is the rabbi of Congregation Ner Tamid in Las Vegas, where he's served since 1988. Oh, there it is, right behind him. And most significantly, where he officiated at my husband's bar mitzvah. So welcome, Rabbi Axelrod.
Thank you. Good Shabbos, everyone. Whether I stand with you on the bima of Beth Am or share the bima virtually, it always feels like home. Because, well, for me, Congregation Beth Am will always be home. Here I am all these years later and still my home congregation. I remember when the sanctuary was built. I remember when Torahs were dedicated as a student in religious school and we raised money. I remember my bar mitzvah talking about a very important subject to me, what it's like to be the son of the rabbi. And I was quite serious, mind you. And Hannah Cohen, of blessed memory, in retrospect, held back a bit of a smile and laughter as she rehearsed me with great sincerity for my bar mitzvah. I guess what I want to say is, know me for who I am and what I stand for. And while we all look for a sense of self, we also realize that we are the products of so many things, including people who are influential in our lives. My dad, Rabbi Sidney Axelrod of blessed memory, would be 100 years old this June if he were alive. And yet he is alive because we're talking about him and we're talking about his legacy. And it is his legacy of social justice that helped shape me as a person, and really the character of Congregation Beth Am to this very day. He was a person who walked the walk, quite literally, praying with his feet while walking with Martin Luther King Jr. It's not just that he did it, he talked about it. He taught from his experience, several generations of Beth Amniks. He taught what he felt, what he saw, and what he understood. And through his eyes and through his sharing of being an eyewitness to history, we understood what it could mean to risk one's life and reputation to stand up for one's beliefs. And so this lectureship was developed after his retirement as a fitting tribute to continuing this legacy. I am so grateful to this congregation for having such a long memory and an audacious history of social justice concerns. I commend the members of your new Racial Equity and Justice Committee. Wow, that in itself is a statement and an achievement. And I am so grateful to know that Beth Am is in good hands since my dear friend, Rabbi Martyr, has retired, that you are in good hands with Rabbi Jeremy Morrison. You, along with Rabbi Jonathan Prosnit, Cantor Jamie Spall, and Rabbi Sarah Weissman, form an incredible clergy team. And so as I reflect back upon the vision of this lectureship, it is truly coming to fruition in a wonderful way tonight. Given my dad's fight for civil rights, given our country's continued struggle with the racial divide, our voice is more important than ever. I can still hear my dad's voice. Sandy, it's not enough. We must do more. We can do more, and we will. Thank you for bringing out one of the very best leaders in the country, Lindsay Newman, who is the Director of Community Engagement at Bechol Lashon. Uber talented in her work for childhood education, issues related to diversity and inclusion. What a great choice she is for the Axelrod Lectureship, continuing the lessons and legacy of my father and the values that he held so dear. Thank you so much. This is so meaningful to our family. Shabbat Shalom.
Thank you, Rabbi, and Shabbat Shalom. And thank you to you and your siblings for joining us tonight. And we send love to your mom as well.
Thank you.
I invite you now to turn in your prayer books to our candle lighting blessing. We're going to be announcing the page numbers in brackets. If you have the Shabbat version of the prayer book, it's on page 120. And if you have the full version, it's also on page 120. And for the honor of lighting candles, I would like to invite forward, members of the Racial Equity and Justice Committee to join us in lighting candles. So please join with me. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav, v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat. Thank you to my friends. And before we lift up the cup of joy for Kiddush, we have a very special birthday in our congregation today. So I want to send a special shout out to Marvin Jones, who is 96 today. And I want to mention his family, who are all sending him lots of love. His wife, Irene, his daughter, Frosty, and son, Gary, and children-in-law, Rick and Jan. He is the grandfather of Ryan, Zach, and Andrew, and his wife, Georgie, and great-grandfather of Artie and Charlie. And we wish you a year of many blessings, of time with family and friends, of laughter, learning, health, and happiness. Ad Mea Ve'asrim, may you live to be 120. You're almost there. So happy birthday, Marvin. And we'll lift up the cup of joy in your honor tonight as we chant Kiddush. Cantor, take it away.
Right.
123.
123. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, borei peri hagafen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav, v'ratzavanu b'shabbat kodsho, v'ahava uvratzon hinchilanu, zikaron l'maaseh bereshit, ki hu yom techila lemikrae kodesh, zeicher l'tziat Mitzrayim. Kivanu v'acharta v'otanu kidashta mikol hamim v'shabbat kodshecha be'ahava u'v'ratzon hinchaltanu. Baruch atah Adonai Mekadesh HaShabbat. L'chaim.
We continue with Lecha Dodi on page 138. As is our custom, we will sing the first, second, fifth, and ninth verses. Please join with us.
Here we go. So this is kind of a sort of an Eastern melody, that one that comes to us from the group Nava Tehillah in Israel. Lecha Dodi Likerat Kala Pene Shabbat Nekabela Lecha Dodi Likerat Kala Pene Shabbat Nekabela Shamor v'zachor b'diburecha Hishmianu el hamiuchad Adonai echad u'shemo echad L'shem u'letiferet ולתחילה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה כי היא מקור הברכה מראש מקדם נסוכה סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה התעוררי התעוררי כי באורך ומאורי אורי אורי שיר דברי כבוד אדוני עלייך נגלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה גם בשמחה ובצהלה תוך אמוני עם סגולה בואי חלה בואי חלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה לך דודי לקראת כלה פני שבת נקבלה.
We continue with the call to prayer, the Baruch Hu, on page 146.
Yai lai lai, yai lai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai, yai lai lai, yai lai lai lai, yai lai 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 lai, ya lai lai ya lai lai yai lai ya lai lai yai lai lai ya lai lai ya lai lai yai lai ya lai lai yai lai yai dai Baruch hu et Adonai
Dr. Martin Luther King famously wrote, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." Dr. King believed in the redemptive power of love, and so did our sages. So we turn to page 150 and pray the words of Ahavat Olam, giving thanks for Torah, the symbol of God's eternal love.
Ahavat Olam, Beit Yisrael, Amcha Avta, Amcha Avta. Torah u'mitzvot, chukim u'mishpatim, otanu limadeta. Alkein Adonai Eloheinu b'shokvenu, uvkumenu nasiach bechukecha, v'nismach b'divrei toratecha, uv'mitzvotecha le'olam va'ed, ki hem chayenu, ve'orech yameinu, uvahem nege yomam v'layla, nege yomam v'layla. Ve'ahavatecha al tasir, mimenu le'olamim, Baruch atah Adonai, Ohev amo Yisrael, Ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad, Baruch Shem Kevod Malchuto, Le'olam Eved. Please be seated. It's my pleasure now to invite up next week's bat mitzvah, Maya Eisenberg, who will lead us in Ve'ahavta, which can be found on page 154.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ושוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך. למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אדוני אלוהיכם emet.
That was great, Maya. Thanks so much. And we're all looking forward to next Shabbat when you're truly going to shine. That was great. John Lewis wrote, "Freedom is not a state, it is an act. It is not some enchanted garden perched high on a distant plateau where we can finally sit down and rest. Freedom is the continuous action we all must take. And each generation must do its part to create an even more fair, more just society." Join us in singing our freedom song, Micha Mocha, page 158.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש. מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדר בקודש. נורא תהילות אוסף אלה, נורא תהילות אוסף אלה, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. מלכותך ראו בניך, בוקי הים לפני משה ומרים. זה אלי ענו ויאמרו, זה אלי ענו ויאמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. יאי לה לי לי, יא לי לי, יא לה לה לי, יאי לה לי לי, יא לה לי, יא לה לה. Ya la la, ya la la la, ya la la la, ya la la, ya la. Nora tehilot osef ele, Nora tehilot osef ele, Adonai yimloch leolam va'ed. V'nemar כי פדהו אדוני את יעקב, וגאלו מיד חזק ממנו, ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל לישראל.
We sing a song of peace and of shelter and of love. Hashkivenu. Of course, also let there be love.
Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storms. Hashkivenu, Adonai Eloheinu. Hashkivenu, Leshalom. Vehamidenu, Shomreinu lechayim. Ufros aleinu, Sukat shlomecha. Hashkivenu, Adonai Eloheinu. Hashkivenu, shalom. Let there be love and understanding among us. Let peace and friendship be our shelter from life's storm.
In an envelope marked personal, God addressed me a letter. In an envelope marked personal, I have given my answer. The Amidah, our standing prayer, begins on page 164, and I invite you to rise.
Ya la lai lai lai, 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 ya la lai lai lai. Adonai sifatai tiftach Ufi yagiti latecha. Adonai, open up my lips that my mouth may declare your praise. Ya la 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 la, 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 ya la 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 la. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei Avoteinu v'Imotenu Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, v'Elohei Yaakov Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Rachel, v'Elohei Leah Ha'el Hagadol, Hagibor v'Hanora El Elyon, Gomel Chasadim Tovim V'Konei HaKol V'Zocher Chastei Avot v'Imahot U'Mevi Geula Livnei V'neihem Leman Shemo Be'ahava Melech Ozer U'Moshia U'Magen Baruch atah Adonai Magen Avraham ve'ezrat Sarah Atah Gibor le'olam Adonai Mechayei hakol atah Rav lehoshia Mashiv haruach Morid hagashem Mechalkel chayim bechesed Mechayei hakol berachamim rabim Somech noflim verofei cholim Umatir asurim Umekayem emunato Lishenei afar Michamocha bal gevurot O mido melach Melech memit umechayeh Umatzmiach Yeshua V'ne'eman ata l'chayot hakol Baruch atah Adonai Mechayei hakol Atah kadosh shimcha kadosh U'kadoshim b'chol yom Yehalelucha selah Baruch atah Adonai Ha'el HaKadosh. Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true, and with thanksgiving I'll be a living sanctuary, oh, for you. Pitchuli, Sharei Tzedek, Avovam, Odeya, Pitchuli, Sharei Tzedek, Avovam, Odeya. Oh Lord, prepare me to be a sanctuary, pure and holy, tried and true, and with thanksgiving I'll be a living sanctuary, oh, for you.
Our prayer for healing is on page 253. If you're thinking of someone at this time in need of healing and need of renewal of body, of mind, of spirit, I invite you to share their name out loud. Even if you're in a room by yourself, I know sometimes it feels awkward, but speak their name out loud. The Bethlehem community specifically on this Shabbat remembers or is thinking of Jeff Alkazan, Mason Easley, Dale Prinstein, Maureen Roskoff, Stephen Ware, Celia Wender. We'll sing the prayer of healing together, page 253.
Mi shebeirach avoteinu mekor habracha laimoteinu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say Amen. Mi shebeirach imoteinu mekor habracha lavoteinu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shelema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say Amen.
Lindsay Newman is the Director of Community Engagement at Bechol Hashon. Bechol Hashon is an organization that strengthens Jewish identity by raising awareness about the ethnic, racial, and cultural diversity of Jewish identity and experience. Prior to joining Bechol Hashon, Lindsay worked in the fields of women's rights advocacy and early childhood education. and has dedicated herself to inclusion and diversity in the Jewish community for over a decade. She received her BS in Industrial and Labor Relations from Cornell University. And her talk tonight is titled Not Free to Desist, Reigniting the Jewish Commitment to Racial Justice. Welcome, Lindsay.
Thank you so much, Rabbi Sarah. It is really great to be with you all today. I am Lindsay Newman. I use she, hers pronouns, and I am Director of Community Engagement at Bechol Lashon and co-founder of Not Free to Desist, an open letter challenging the Jewish community to reimagine its commitment to racial justice and anti-racism. It is a pleasure to be with you today on this special Shabbat on the eve of the weekend we spend every year commemorating the legacy and inspiration of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. dedicated his life to building a society based on justice, equal opportunity, and love of one's fellow human beings. The realization of these values were referred to as the beloved community, which his widow, Coretta Scott King, described as, quote, a global vision in which all people can share in the wealth of the earth. In the beloved community, poverty, hunger, and homelessness will not be tolerated because standards of human decency will not allow it. Racism and all forms of discrimination, bigotry, and prejudice will be replaced by an all-inclusive spirit of sisterhood and brotherhood. Today, I spend a lot of my time focused on working to realize that same vision of justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion in the Jewish community. It is true that this is a bold vision, one in which each person in our community is able to bring every part of who they are into the room, one where that is not only allowed, but where we celebrate and honor all of those parts of ourselves, what makes us similar and what differentiates us. A requirement of this vision is a commitment to the ways in which we create a community where everyone feels that they belong. Belonging has been a topic that the Jewish world has grappled with throughout our history in many iterations. We constantly ask ourselves, how do we belong to one another? Because we Jews are diasporic people, we constantly ask ourselves, how does the Jewish community belong to the broader groups of peoples and cultures we find ourselves living amongst? And belonging is also one of the essential questions which permeates the political discourse of today. We are living in a time when divisiveness and othering is used as a powerful tool to distance us from one another and control the structures of society in which we live. The scholar John Powell of the Othering and Belonging Institute at UC Berkeley defines othering as a set of common processes that engender marginality and persistent inequality across any of the full range of human differences. In his work and research on how to create fair and inclusive society, Dr. Powell expands on Dr. King's beloved community, describing that community as one where being connected to the other is seen as the foundation of a healthy self, not its destruction, and where the racial other is seen not as the infinite other, but rather as the other that is always and already a part of us. There are other timeless teachings and traditions that we can look to for guidance here. There's the eternal truth that resides in the concept of Ubuntu. It's a principle that has existed for many generations in the oral tradition of Southern Africa. As Archbishop Desmond Tutu describes this perspective, Ubuntu is not, I think, therefore I am. He says rather, I am a human because I belong, I participate, I share. In essence, I am because you are. You are my other me, and I cannot exist without my reflection in you. Within Jewish tradition, there are those who teach that it is the feeling of belonging to each other as Jews that is an essential part of our identity. They teach that the notion of chosenness is not in the Jews' special contributions to the rest of the world, but rather in Jews' unique responsibility to one another. This responsibility has been a hallmark of the work of many of our American Jewish institutions since their inception, whether that be the Federation system, our Jewish community centers, or even our communities of worship. So the question then becomes, how can we design our institutions to perpetuate that belonging to one another? We already know that our systems and institutions are not reflecting the true diversity of our community, nor meeting the unique needs of each individual based on all of our identities, both seen and unseen. Where might we have forgotten this age-old universal truth of belonging to one another? How have we forgotten our role in what the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. described as the inescapable network of mutuality that binds all of humanity? Dr. King says that whatever affects one directly affects all indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are who you ought to be. And you can never be who you ought to be until I am who I ought to be. To figure out where we have erred in becoming who we ought to be, we must pause, reflect, challenge ourselves, and wrestle with the truth. In our Jewish tradition, we learn and practice teshuvah, the process of admitting where we may have erred. Our teshuvah, or coming back to ourselves, our centeredness, and our higher aspirations begins with the vidui, or the confession. Our long confession, the al-chet, is sometimes translated as a confession of our sins, but actually it is more closely related to an archery term where we account for where we missed the mark. And after we have recognized where we have missed the mark, we can try again. This helps us recognize the confronting oppression and racism as a continual lifelong practice. It was in this spirit that the document that I helped write, Not Free to Desist, an open letter from Black Jews, non-Black Jews of color, and their allies to Jewish federations, foundations, organizations, and initiatives, was written, which you can find on notfreetodesist.org. This letter seeks to challenge the Jewish community to assess where we have missed the mark in terms of being an inclusive community that lives its values and engage in a bold re-envisioning of racial justice for the Jewish community. The first line of our letter reads, "We write to you today as dedicated members of the American Jewish community, who are called upon by the Jewish imperative to not sit idly by when we see injustice before us. We go on to say that Judaism is predicated on a covenant, which outlines the holy obligations we hold to one another as members of a community with a collective purpose. Our covenants remind us that those with power have an obligation to empower those with less, and remind us that those with freedom have an obligation to help those with. When we honor our commitment to each other, then our communities will flourish with rain at its proper time, grain, wine, oil, and grass in our fields. When we do not fully commit, we risk the future of our very community." In writing this letter, we were in a sense asking, where has the Jewish community missed the mark in making sure that we all feel part of and served by that beloved community? In recognizing where we have failed to build a community rooted in belonging, I have identified 3 main areas where we can focus both as a community and as individuals to making positive change. First, we must remind ourselves who we are. We have to remind ourselves of the truth that we have forgotten, that the Jewish community is inherently a racially diverse community, that this has been true for millennia. Since the time that Jews were first dispersed from the ancient land of Israel, we have lived all over the world. We know this is also a contemporary truth, that 12 to 15% of our community identifies as people of color, and that percentage will only continue to grow just as America itself is becoming more and more racially and ethnically diverse. We also know that just recognizing the diversity of identities that exists within our community is not enough. We must look beyond just simple diversity. As Angela Davis said once, quote, "Diversity is not a synonym for justice. Diversity without structural transformation simply brings those who were previously excluded into a system as racist, as misogynistic, as homophobic as it was before." So our challenge persists. The second area we can look to focus our action is that we must also ask ourselves as a community, how can we seek to understand the paradigms of othering and oppressions that impact our world? In the US in particular, this means understanding the racial paradigm. How has race been constructed? How has anti-Blackness been used as a basis from which to build our striated society? It is true that many Jews who came to the US, especially those who originated in Europe, were able to assimilate into whiteness. And we must interrogate that. There are many reasons for why this may have happened. One explanation is that it was partially a survival mechanism, a way to seek safety after many years of persecution. And we must ask ourselves, how can we recognize the privileges of whiteness that many in the Jewish community have been able to enjoy? How has this affected our community, and how can we reckon with this? For people of color, talking about race is often a necessity. And we need more spaces to unpack whiteness and its impact on the identity and experience of Jews and the Jewish community. Because if we cannot discuss the dynamics of oppression and racism or see ourselves within them, we cannot stop participating in oppression and racism. For we know that humans created race and therefore racism. And we also know that the choices we make can dismantle that too. So in order to achieve that dismantling, we come to our third center of focus, which is that we must ground ourselves in awareness and intention and gain comfort in discomfort. Being aware of the values that guide our work, as well as the purpose of the work, is the starting point to achieving transformational change. We can recognize why this work is hard without letting ourselves off the hook of responsibility for change. We know that this work is hard because, one, it must be done individually and in community. When done in community, it's both challenging and necessary to hold space for those with varied experience levels. And secondly, we must build our capacity to hold multiple truths at the same time. So for example, that understanding, an example of the multiple truths would be that understanding the ways that Jews can both be oppressed and also at the same time be complicit in the systemic oppression that plagues our society. When we seek the necessary structural transformation that will allow our Jewish community to perpetuate racial justice, we are posed with a difficult task. And we must ask ourselves difficult questions, but that is okay. Jewish tradition has always taught us to wrestle with the difficult questions, just as Jacob wrestled with God. While the first step is in identifying what's broken, we know that there is also a path forward. As Rav Nachman teaches, if you believe that breaking is possible, you have to believe that fixing is possible. And I truly do believe that that is possible. And I take comfort in the many that are eager to embark on this work together. We can turn to biblical and rabbinical texts to learn how the Jewish tradition compels us to build a world that celebrates and honors our diversity. While we may identify our values that lead us and connect us to the legacy and ancient wisdom of the Jewish tradition, I have also sought out the words of Dr. King to gain wisdom and guidance in the pursuit of our beloved community. I see comfort in the way that Dr. King grounded his philosophy and activism in love. When I say that he grounded his work in love, I do not mean to easily forgiven, superficial, or uncomplicated love. No. Dr. King knew the difficulty of the task ahead of him. He talked about the complexities of activism and the requirements for social activists when he preached about the need for a tough mind and a tender heart. Dr. King implored us to be tough-minded enough to transcend the world and tender-hearted enough to live in it. We must be tough-minded enough to transcend the comfort of the world as we know it, to imagine new possibilities for our communal and societal structures, of how we relate to one another, of how we might do things differently and endure the initial discomfort that may bring. But we also must be tender-hearted enough to live with radical empathy for our fellow Jews and our fellow citizens of the world, and understanding the ways that we deeply and infinitely belong to one another. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lindsay. We turn now to these words, Lo alecha hamlecha limor. It's not up to you to desist from doing the work. We must dig in and do the work, and we sing them together with our cantor.
not working again. Okay, well, you can hear me, and so
for
all right. So if you'd like to sing along with us, Lo Alecha Hamlacha Ligmor, like Rabbi Morrison said, you can follow along with us. In the back of the prayer book. All right. All right, here we are. Good.
Page 645 in the middle of the page.
Thank you. Lo alecha ligmor, lo alecha ligmor, lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, lo alecha ligmor, velo ata ben chorin leibatel mimena, velo ata ben chorin, velo ata ben chorin leibatel mimena, velo ata ben chorin. Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, lo alecha ligmor, lo alecha hamlacha ligmor, lo alecha ligmor, velo ata ben chorin leivatel mimena, velo ata ben chorin, velo ata ben chorin leivatel mimena, velo ata ben chorin.
On this Martin Luther King weekend and this time where we celebrate the inauguration and the peaceful transfer of power, even though we know that democracy is fragile. Thinking of the words of Dr. King, where we must learn to live together as brothers and sisters or perish together as fools. With the opportunity to read the slide of the prayer for our nation. Please join with me out loud as the slide is shown. Prayer for our country. God of holiness, we hear your message. Justice, justice you shall pursue. God of freedom, we hear your charge. Proclaim liberty throughout the land. Inspire us through your teachings and commandments to love and uphold our precious democracy. Let every citizen take responsibility for the rights and freedoms we cherish. Let each of us be an advocate for justice, an activist for liberty, a defender of dignity. And let us champion the values that make our nation a haven for the persecuted, a beacon of hope among the nations. May our actions reflect compassion for all people within our borders and abroad. May our leaders and officials embody the visions of our founders to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. We pray for courage and conscience as we aim to support our country's highest values and aspirations, the hard-won rights that define us as a people, the responsibilities that they entail. We pray for all who serve our country with selfless devotion in peace and in war, from fields of battles to clinics and classrooms, from government to the grassroots, all those whose noble deeds and sacrifices benefit our nation and our world. We are grateful for the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness that our founders ascribed to you, our Creator. We pray for their wisdom and moral strength, that we may be guardians of these rights for ourselves and for the sake of all people, now and forever.
One day, one day, one day, one day, one day, one day. All my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more war, and our children will play one day, one day, one day, one day, one day, one day. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds, I know someday it'll all turn around, because all my life I've been waiting for, I've been praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more war, and our children will play one day, one day, one day. Oh, yo, 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 one day, one day, one day.
Thank you so much, Ella and Sam. The future is bright with you two leading us. Thank you so much for joining your mom for the words of one day, our interpretation of Aleinu. Despite the joy of Shabbat and the joy of community coming together, even virtually, the joy that comes over me from hearing Lindsay Newman give a wonderful Devar Torah or wonderful drash. We know that people come to our worship because they're thinking of someone who's no longer here. They're saying Kaddish, or somebody is dear to them has passed away. If I read the name of your loved one, I invite you to rise in his or her honor, and then we'll all rise and say the words of Kaddish together. Lost to the Beth Am community in this period of Shiva, the last week since passing, we remember with love Cindy Levine, the cousin of Rachel and Ted Tash and Gwen and Jeff Wachtel. And in this period of Shloshim, 30 days since death, we remember Nancy Triger, Jerome Hyman, Edgar Shane, and Myra Enkelis. On this period of Yahrzeit, the anniversary since passing, we remember with love Bertha Abbott, Thelma Akins, Lorraine Apfelberg, Carl Bauman, Hyman Berg, Edward Branston, Barbara Cantor, Leo Cohan, Jerry Consul, Bob Cutler, Donald Engel, Ida Engel, A. Albert Fine, Blanche Feiner, Esther Fernbach, Joan Fishman, David Jarofsky, Eileen Barbara Gittin, Fanny Glassberg, Irene Goldfein, Max Goldstein, Sylvia Gordon, Rita Greenberg, Marshall Green, Solomon Greenstein, Laddie Gross, Ruth Gutterman, Pearl Hecht, John Jacob Highmark, Eugene Hurst, Teddy Jacoby, Dorothy Jacobson, Saul Jacobson, Joan Katz, Lydia Kemmel, Oscar Irving Klein, Laura Klein, Lillian Kretschmar, Maria Krivoshe, Moshe Kurz, Erwin Lehman, Ethel Levine, Betty Mankim, Rita Marks, Norman Edward Martello, Rose Ornstein, Paul Powell, Jean Pitt, Lenore Porter, George Ramras, Sherman Rosenfeld, Elmira Roscoff, Bernard Sack, David Seaman, Florence Seaman, Irving Scher, Mary Schultz, June Simon, Mildred Simon, Abram Simon, Roy Slotnick, Carolyn Stark, Norma Sturp, Lydia Teichner, Ilya Valinsky, Harry Weisblatt, Abraham Weiner, Linda Williams, Israel Zahavi. And of course, on this weekend, to honor the legacy of Dr. King, we remember Dr. Martin Luther King and our own beloved Rabbi Sidney Axelrod. If you're thinking of someone whose names I did not read, I invite you to say their name or enter that into the chat at this time. The words of Kaddish Yatom, the words of Mourner's Kaddish are on page 294. Actually, they're on page 598. I'm sorry about the confusing language. Join with me. Yitkadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbav, v'yama divrach kirte b'yamlich malchute, v'chayechon uv'yomechon, uv'chaye dechol beit Yisrael, b'agala uv'izman kariv b'imru amen. Yehei shmei Rabba mevarach le'olam unmei almaya, yiparach v'yishtabach v'yipa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh, V'yitadar v'yitale v'yitalal shemed kusha b'richu le'ela min kol birchata b'shirata tush bechata b'nechemata damiram b'yama b'imru amen Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu b'al kol Yisrael b'imru amen Osei shalom b'mromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the one who creates harmony on high bring peace to us, peace to Israel, and to all those who mourn, to which we say, Amen.
Oseh shalom b'imromav hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'olkut Israel ve'imeru amen.
Thanks so much. Cantor Shpal. I was told earlier that Rabbi Axelrod, I was told by Rabbi Sandy Axelrod that Rabbi Sidney Axelrod would often sing that, including at the Passover Seder. So I love the version of Oseh Shalom to the words of to the tune of We Shall Overcome. A beautiful tribute that marks this weekend, and also our beloved Rabbi Emeritus. Just a few very, very brief announcements. As you know, or as you may know, each week we collect tzedakah donations for a important, worthy cause. This week, or this month actually, we're going to be collecting for the American Joint Distributions Committee Coronavirus Emergency Fund. As we all know, the pandemic has created a public health crisis unprecedented in most of our lifetimes, leading to the vast emergency humanitarian needs worldwide. And the JDC, has over 106 years of expertise and experience responding to crisis, and its need is committed more than ever. So I encourage you to go onto the Betham webpage and donate and be generous to help the JDC's Coronavirus Emergency Fund. And then also, as you no doubt got to be part of a wonderful drash and wonderful interpretation, and Lindsay Newman will be joining us in the foyer. You can see the slide coming up with the link right after services. So please, Rabbi Weissman will be in dialogue And for open for Q&A with Lindsay Newman about B'chol Lashon, about the words that she said. So please join us after services for a little bit more of this beautiful Shabbat that we get to be a part of. So, Cantor Shbal has an extra treat in store for us tonight. Beautiful interpretations of the words of Lo Yisel Goy El Goy Cherev. The war shall not lift up war against one another. So, Cantor Shbal, take us away.
Hey, oh, oh, hey, hey, oh, oh, hey. Lo yisagoy el goy cherev, lo yilmedu od milchama, lo yisagoy el goy cherev, lo yilmedu od milchama. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, bound by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I ain't gonna study war no more. 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 Ain't gonna study war no more. Ain't gonna study war no more. I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside, down by the riverside. I'm gonna lay down my sword and shield down by the riverside, down by the riverside.
Whoa, what a great song. We have a homemade challah here. Mav's got one too. Ezra, will you take the cover off? And join with me in the blessing, thanking God for giving sustenance from the earth. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Shabbat shalom. Shabbat shalom. Join us in the foyer with Lindsay Newman. Shabbat shalom, everybody.
Shabbat shalom.
I took a picture.
Shabbat shalom, everyone. Take good care.
I was the one who made it. Here, you.
Shall overcome. We shall overcome someday. Oh, deep in my heart, I do believe we shall overcome someday.